You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Didn't have a whole lot of Flyers games this week, but we
None
did have
exact.
we did have a lot to talk about. There were some other games. There were some
yeah.
all-star games. We have a lot to get into today, but as we get into that, make sure to follow us on the social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso pretty much everywhere. So, all right, diving right into it. Unfortunately, we are starting with a pretty serious topic for the second week in a row.
Yep.
Carter Hart once again is in the news. The things that we drew a dotted line between last week kind of got down in pen.
As much as they can right now, yeah.
Right. He has been charged with sexual assault, one count. 4 of the 5 players involved were charged with 1 count. Michael McLeod was charged with an additional count. We know a lot of the details. We don't quite know everything. The London police statement is still scheduled for tomorrow as of this moment. Kevin, there's a lot here. Where do you want to start to tackle this one?
I'll just go kind of follow, like same thing we did last week, follow the timeline, get everything together. There's a little bit more certainty in talking about it now, obviously, because you had confirmations of things basically. And
Michael McLeod is player 1, etc.
Well, I don't know even know about that. I didn't see anything like that specifically. Like you need it literally written in ink.
I understand.
That's what I'm saying. You can't draw assumptions.
I imagine that is something that, I don't know.
Well, no, I'm saying until I see it written down as such, I'm not saying it. That's
fair enough.
I will say that for anybody who thought that we were going to have a quiet week, that the games were over on Saturday, there wasn't anything supposedly that was going to happen with this until Monday of this week, that we were going to get, the London police were going to speak and kind of address this. And that would be where it was, which, by the way, tactfully done in line with the NHL schedule, by the way, to not make it a thing that they can officially talk on over the All-Star weekend. We'll get to that because I have a couple of thoughts on that too. But you got a couple of days. We did the last show, which on Sunday, got a couple of days, and here it is 4:00 on Tuesday afternoon, and the story starts evolving. And as has been the case in a lot of these situations over the last several years, as news like this comes out, especially in the hockey world, it's a report from Rick Westhead of TSN that kind of comes out and gets the ball rolling on this. That guy is phenomenal at his job.
If he doesn't end up with a Pulitzer or at the very least, like some
equivalent of some sort for investigative, because at this point in time, like, he's reporting on hockey related stories. He's never gone to a game, as far as I know.
It's human stories.
He is an investigative journalist that is, in particular right now, specializing in the hockey related side of that.
Yep.
And
between Kyle Beach and all this stuff.
Right. And honestly, his credibility in the Kyle Beach thing is what makes his credibility so good in this, that you could read something reported by him in this situation and say, listen, as much as you need confirmation to completely affirm these things, his reputation is so good that it probably is true. And we're going to find out that this is what's coming down. So let's start with this. We did actually, this was something that happened legit hours after we finished the last show, that Alex Fermenton did turn himself in and had been charged.
And was the first person to be
that was Sunday,
named.
Right. That was Sunday, which made you think, like, I know reading it, I went, oh boy, the first domino is falling. Here we go. And you knew to brace yourself. And then nothing really came of it. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, he also was the only one in his release, like in his statement or about taking a leave or whatever, that said he was returning to Canada.
Right.
Not that the other 4 couldn't, but they were obviously closer proximity playing in the NHL.
It was a bigger deal that he was coming back from Europe.
If nothing else, that there was reason to believe that until there was a press conference, that the other 4 who actively had NHL contracts and technically still do, we'll get into that too.
Yeah, we will.
That they could have kind of hidden behind the fact that there was a public thing that was already on tap and tried to kind of go into this quietly.
Wait for it.
Well, and until somebody puts something out is the point, So Fermenton goes and turns himself in, and the other 4 are kind of at large at that moment until the report comes out that here, this is what the story is. The report is that they're all facing charges.
Yep.
And once and actually put names to it too, because let's remember the only report that was out previously was just that it's 5.
It's 5 players,
and then we started to draw connections between 5 players on that team took leave of absence. What does that mean, or what does it look like that means? Now they put their names to it. Here's the report that puts all 5 of their names directly to this case. Now we kind of know without a shadow of a doubt what is coming. And that was when the statements from lawyers started to come in. We knew about Formenton already. Michael McLeod's statement was first, or his lawyer's statement was first, confirming it. Carter Hart's was second. Yep. Then Dylan Dubé and Cal Foote was the final one. Let's put it this way. I spent a decent chunk of Tuesday afternoon, by the way. I didn't write anything, obviously, until some of it happened so close together. I was probably writing. I didn't really start writing until Hearts came out anyway. Not that there was a reason to sit and hold on it.
Right.
It was, late afternoon and you're trying to figure all that out. As I'm writing the Hart portion of it, Dubé's came out. So I quickly went back in and updated that. Okay, Dubé said something. And then put a footnote. Cal Foote's the only one who hasn't said anything. And I think an hour later, Foote's statement was out, or his lawyers were out. And it's like, okay, now they're all in on this thing. They're all the lawyers have made statements and confirmed the charge. And that was actually that's the really important part. Isn't making a statement from your lawyer.
They confirmed that the charges
they all confirmed charges were being.
My client has been charged, right?
Right.
And another thing I just wanted to mention real quick, since we're talking about the attorneys, is you may notice that we mentioned 5 different statements. It is 5 different legal teams. I believe that is being done in accordance with Canadian law. I do not believe they're allowed to have the same
represent multiple
legal
people.
representation. There is also a possibility, kind of looking forward a little bit, if there is eventually a trial, there is a possibility that it will be lumped in and then all 5 players will be tried at the same time. So
sure.
that is something that is a possibility moving forward. Just
right.
I was very into the legal world, and I kind of know.
Well, believe me, I sat there and turned around and said, at some point in time, I went from covering hockey games to all of a sudden, basically constantly writing the script to a Law and Order episode.
It feels,
practically, it feels
wild.
like it.
Yeah.
And the one thing that you say that at the very least I think is going to be true, because like you said, we don't know if they're going to necessarily be tried together in a case. Right. At the very least, there's going to be a ton of cross-examination in these cases where, because everybody's would be a witness to the same thing, essentially. That if everybody's story is supposed to correlate, especially the woman who is the victim in this,
right?
And for what it's worth, by the way, I believe every report that's been out has said that she's going to be part of that trial in every way possible.
And that's one of the reasons that they may all be lumped together. So she only has to go.
And for what it's worth, by the way, and I'm gonna get to how Gary Bettman spoke at the All-Star game and things like that or whatever. He did confirm that she did not participate in the NHL's investigation.
Okay,
and that was her right to not do so. But
why would you?
I get it. Well, I'll get into that later. But that's where the facts stand for right now. We can start to kind of look at repercussions a little bit. Obviously, still a fine line, because
going to a court of law, innocent until proven guilty, does still apply to a certain extent. It does, but
also at this point in time, also while it's the lawyers making these statements on behalf of their clients, because the police department hasn't held a press conference yet and has not actually formally announced the charges, despite what the lawyers' statements are saying, that kind of puts the league in a spot where to this point they haven't had to act on anything and shouldn't, for that matter. Because again, you haven't gotten an official statement yet beyond. I mean, yes, I get it. Their lawyers are all saying they've been charged, but the police department really needs to step forward to kind of give this some more levity at this point and really give more grounds for something to happen. And even then, I mean, honestly, it didn't sound like much is going to happen right now because everything is pending trial anyway.
Yeah.
If nothing else, let's say the way this works also is everybody, with the exception of Alex Formenton, who was not actively on an NHL roster to begin with, each player is on paid leave of absence. Each player is considered non-roster. Carter Hart was officially moved to non-roster this week specifically, but they're considered non-roster. Once the charges are formally announced, that's maybe when you'll see some things happen. The league is going to at least probably have to put out a formal statement on it. But the league really has no grounds to do anything until charges are officially out there. And then everything falls kind of into the hands of the NHL, Gary Bettman, the Players Association. There's a lot of things to connect there too, because you're going to have two different sides going at each other.
Just to clarify regarding player status, you said they're non-roster. You said they're getting paid. They are not taking up a roster spot, but their money does still count against the salary cap, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And obviously, Carter Hart, the one that's most relevant to this situation, is a restricted free agent at the end of the year. And we'll talk about that. But
that's part of where I wanted to go, because this kind of teeters into, because obviously Bettman got asked a lot of questions about. Well, Bettman came to that press conference with a prepared statement. Let's start there. He actually did come with a prepared statement to kind of address, which I'll give a little bit of credit for, because they could have just showed up and been like, "Hey guys, big All-Star game weekend,
we're not talking
whatever,"
about it.
and had to wait until someone questioned on it, and then probably just hid behind comment.
They addressed it.
At least it was addressed, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go head on. I'd say sort of. At least he came prepared for that.
As head on as Gary Bettman ever addresses anything ever.
Oh, don't worry, I have some words to use regarding everything with that. Because there's really nothing the league can do in regards to Formenton, because he's not playing. You can very simply honestly, they could very simply, as an ex-NHL player at this given moment, they could say he's suspended indefinitely and then requires reinstatement, and that's the end of that.
Right.
Like, seriously, like he'd have to meet with Bettman to have anything in his career done. Obviously, that Bettman's going to turn that down, or should turn it down, as long as there is a pending charge against him.
Of course.
And then, okay, if something happens where the charges get dropped, there's a settlement, there's whatever happens with the trial, as long as he comes away not requiring jail time.
Right.
If he wants to try to meet with Bettman and get reinstated at that point, then sure, be my guest. But by that point, you got to go through the process nonetheless.
Right.
Like, you're going to still be out of the league for a while or whatever. The difference is the other four players have active contracts, and now I will say this, I do find it phenomenally interesting that, I guess by coincidence, or maybe not, depending on how you want to look at it, that all four players are in the exact same position, which is in the final year of their contracts, which means that
that's a surprise in the slightest.
Well, here's the reason why I'm surprised by it a little bit, because it's not like all of them were up and then signed 1-year deals because of what was going on. Like, it happens that Carter Hart's previous 3-year deal is in the final year of the contract as this all happens. Like, it didn't have to be that way. What if Carter Hart did sign long-term when that contract was up and signed for 5 years?
4 more years left.
Right. And let's say he signed for 5 or 6 years instead of 3. And there's still 3 more years beyond this that he's on the books. That would be a totally different conversation. That's why at least the league and Bettman can look at this and basically say, listen, first of all, the likelihood that they're even like we already brought up, they may not even be allowed back in the country, let alone.
And if you give the NHL the option to punt something down the road, they're going to.
It's not even a matter of that they're like giving them the opportunity to punt something down the road, though, because what basically you're sitting here saying is that once the contracts are up, they're property of no one.
Right.
Every single one of them. The New Jersey Devils have 2 of these players. The Flyers have Hart, and Calgary's got Dubé. They could just as easily sit there when the contract ends and go non-qualified, and that's it. It's over, just like that. Like, and from a who do they belong to standpoint.
Well, and given the fact that this trial, if there is a trial, if this does go the distance here, if there is a trial, it will take place in Ontario, and Ontario does not have a priority system for high-profile cases. So therefore, this case will sit in the queue, and there is a chance that we don't see a trial until 2026.
That's right. But here's the thing: we can say that all we want to, but that, as far as I'm concerned, whatever happens with that happens according to their legal system.
Sure.
The object of the real priority at that given point is that these players are nowhere near an NHL arena.
Correct.
Because as long as it's pending, because that's the way that this should go.
Sure.
It's simply the way it should go. And if that's the case, then that's why I'm saying, as much as the hockey perspective of this is secondary,
right,
it's very easy for all of the teams that currently have these players to sit there and go, their contracts are up at the end of the year. It's pretty obvious at this point that they're not going to be back with their teams for the rest of this season.
Right. We won't have answers.
So they walk. You
Yep.
just or it's not even a matter that they walk. You take care of matters like that.
You cut ties and they float into the ether.
Well, here's also the way I kind of want to put it. The league would have an opportunity also, because Bettman's got control over things like this. He could, if he wanted to, issue suspensions and do something. He's going to pull back, and again, it's a lawyer perspective that sits there and says, don't act upon it. We don't have enough information. As long as it's pending and they're not playing, I think that's justified enough that they're not actively playing, and their contracts are up at the end of the year anyway. So presumably they won't, basically the way I translate that is presumably they won't have jobs after June anyway. So who cares? Right.
And I think that is the case. And, we were chatting about it a little bit before the show, but if we go 2 years without a trial, I mean, where are these guys playing in those 2 years? They're not going to be allowed to leave Canada. They're not going to be allowed to go play in They're not going to be allowed to go play in Europe like Formenton's been doing. Right. Presumably you're locked down in Canada. You're not going to be skating at a high level. Like, even if you are acquitted at this point, if it takes 2-3 years, is your career over anyway?
Right. Well, possibly, sure.
Because these players are young enough that maybe not if they are acquitted. But
it depends on how quickly, though. You're right, because like at the end of the day, think and I'll use Hart as the primary example because of the position that he plays. You have a shelf life as a goalie sometimes,
and for the record,
skip 2 or 3 years of playing, and now all of a sudden you go from 25 to 28. Good luck getting back into
And I would also just like to put it on the record here that I don't necessarily think they will be acquitted, nor should they. And if they are put through the legal system and they are found guilty, I believe they deserve large prison sentences.
Well, there was a little bit out. West had a little bit about that too, about like the difference between, I guess, the difference between a sexual assault charge and then if there's a gang aspect to it, that creates different sentencing or maximum sentences and things like that. So there's a lot of technicalities with it. Like I said, all of a sudden we dove into the world of we're writing a Law and Order script here.
Yeah, and
although it is real life, obviously.
Right. Well, and it's a lot of stuff, like I said, that London Police is going to make a statement tomorrow. Sure. We may touch on it briefly next week if there is something.
Well, and you already touched on something like about whether or not they would have careers anyway. Let's put it this way: you can leave the door open that there's a possibility they're not guilty in all of this, as they say there are. It doesn't take away from the fact that these players at this point have permanently damaged their reputations one way or the other. Yep. Like, it's going to be hard for any second chance, even if they are found not guilty, just because of the fact that in today's world, we're not. In most cases, you know what? I don't want to say it.
There's the court of law and the court of public opinion.
Well, there is, but here's what I was going. Here's what I want. Like what I kind of wanted to amend about that, because I was going to say we don't turn a blind eye. Depends on who you are. Like I think teams may or leagues may, because whatever. But the public sure as hell isn't.
Oh, Michael McLeod will be a KHL superstar.
We're not.
Anyway,
possibly. We're not, we're not willing to just hand things out that easily. Like, and I like the way that I always feel like this is the National Hockey League. And just like any other major sports league, just like any prestigious job title that anyone could have in any field, it's a privilege to be a part of it. So when that privilege is abused in any way, it makes you consider how deserving the person even is to get another opportunity to be there. So, I look at stuff like that, and that's, and listen, that's kind of the teeter off of that. That's why I'm not surprised by kind of the league's reaction, to an extent, because, well, and on one hand, there's nothing they can do actively. They, like I said, they'll probably release a statement after the announcement is made by London Police or whatever. But Bettman spoke at the All-Star game this weekend and was asked a lot of questions about it. As a matter of fact, beyond the prepared statement that they came with, and this is one point that kind of goes in line with what we're talking about that I want to bring up too, is I guess through translation, so to speak, if you're trying to read between the lines of what he's saying, he kind of almost flat out just said straight up at this given moment, they're free agents as it is.
They're done. Right.
Right. Like as much as there's the formality of they're going to remain non-roster and they're not taking up a roster spot, but they count against the cap of their teams probably for the rest of the year.
Legally speaking, their contracts will be paid. Right.
So and then I guess at that point too, beyond the season, there's really also nothing for the league to do, right? Like, because
this should be self-policing. No one's reaching out and offering Dylan Dubé a contract this summer.
Or they shouldn't anyway.
I imagine they won't be.
Right. But and listen, while what he's saying is true, that yes, like you don't expect them to be active while this is ongoing and their contracts are up in basically a matter of months. So it essentially takes care of itself to an extent. They, again, while all of this is true, they always they take things that are rightfully so uncomfortable to begin with and make it more uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
So the first 3 questions of the press conference or 3 or 4 were Robin Doolittle, who was the Globe and Mail reporter who had the initial story about 5 players that were supposed to be surrendering to London police, right?
And probably been side by side with Rick Westhead through a lot of these stories over the last couple of years.
The fascinating part with stuff like that is that they're not even it's not even with the same outlets, that these are people who are digging and getting this information and doing it through separate outlets, kind of the way, in the same way that a trade would happen and you go, well, Elliot Friedman had it first, but here's another detail that Saravalli's going to get. And oh, wait, Pierre LeBrun's got another little nugget about this thing too, that all equates to a total story, right? No, so she asked maybe the first 3 or 4 questions, and finally at some point Bettman goes, are we having a personal conversation or are we just going to open up the floor? I mean, that's just cringeworthy. And
there's other ways to say that. I understand,
and I get where he's and I get it.
Right.
It's the All-Star game. You're not but at the same time, this is something that your league is facing.
Sure,
step up and answer the damn question.
Sure. I absolutely agree.
You knew it was coming. You had to know it was coming. And at the same time, it's not like it's something that's as simple as ask a question and there's no follow-up to it. There's multiple follow-ups.
Right.
And Bettman also said something along the lines of about how 99.9% of the people in the game are the type who conduct themselves properly or something to that effect. And this doesn't embody hockey culture. And you want to go, you wanted somebody
That's
to
a
go
high
up
percentage.
And, you wanted someone to go up there and shake some sense and go, hello, the Chicago Blackhawks ring a bell.
Right, you have an entire organization.
That was right. Yeah. He tried to make it sound like over the last decade that things are going swimmingly, and this is just one minor. It's no, Gary, this isn't new. If you were
the fact that Kevin Cheveldayoff is still the GM in Winnipeg is astonishing to me after the Chicago stuff. But
so
anyway.
This is not the last time that I have the potential of saying the word cringeworthy during because there's a lot of pieces of that weekend in general that are, but
yeah, we'll get to it.
But whenever it's always things like this because the commissioners and Bettman just crossed over as I think the longest tenured commissioner in sports history, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, not NHL history, sports history. Yes,
right, because he's been doing it at this point. He's been doing it for 32 years, I guess. It's been since '92, right? So
it's astounding to believe that he was 40 when he got that job.
Well, but this is
crazy.
Okay, but this is what I'm saying, because you take a guy at his age who is up there trying to lighten up a situation because it's the All-Star weekend and may try to
he's trying to give you a little punch on the arm.
Talk
about fun stuff.
To an extent, but also you look at that conversation and you go or not conversation, that line of questioning, and it becomes he's trying to make a joke out of that.
Yeah.
Are we having a personal conversation? Is this a personal interview, or are we going to open up the floor?
Right.
And it's it's not funny though. You may be trying to make it funny, but it's not. At one point in time, I looked over, I had the stream going, and I'm this feels like the two old men sitting in the balcony on the Muppets. Right.
Statler and Waldorf.
Right. With what's it called? With Bill Daly sitting next to him.
Oh, I'm convinced him and Bill Daly are just Statler and Waldorf, but quite frankly, Statler and Waldorf are funnier.
Well, sure, because anybody who tries to be that funny in those settings doesn't come across as funny. Even down to they had everybody introducing themselves or whatever, and Elliot Friedman just starts asking his question, and Bettman goes, "I know who you are, Elliot, but say it for the rest of it." And it's
right,
dude, when did you become a second grade teacher? That you're conducting the media room like it's a classroom. Come on, let's all be adults here.
When is Gary's contract up? It's in 2 or 3 years?
Oh, who the hell knows?
I believe his contract is coming up soon. I think he's done. And I think, and something we'll talk about a little bit later on, is that another one of the things that they announced over the course of All-Star Weekend is the fact that the NHL will be going back to the Olympics in 2026 and 2030. And I think that is the crown jewel that he's retiring on. Is, look, I gave you back Olympic play, and he's out. So I think he's trying
one can only hope.
And I think he's trying to turn his media image into a more positive, almost, going for the funny guy, lovable grandpa or whatever he's going for.
It's also, it's also a crutch when you know that there's also things that you don't want to talk about. Let's remember, this is the point of it's uncomfortable because it's supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
You can either address it head on, or you can try to lean on the crutch of using your humor or whatever you think you're trying to do. Frankly, but it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable.
Frankly, it's uncomfortable because it sucks.
Well, sure, but my point is that, listen, sometimes that's what you face in life.
Yep.
Listen, not everything's perfect, and people are going to do things that are wrong and not moral. And when it happens and you oversee a league where it's involved in this case, you have two options. You can address it head on, or you can try to beat around the bush with it and try to use humor to lighten the mood of the room when it's going on or whatever. And it actually, it makes, that's how I said, it makes what's already uncomfortable more uncomfortable, because I'm sitting there watching that and I'm going, you're really trying to gloss over this.
And by the way, if you're not uncomfortable in this conversation, go read the complaint, go do the research, go read what happened.
It's what allegedly happened anyway.
What allegedly happened.
Yes.
It is uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable. And that's why I urge any listeners who may not know kind of the depths of what's going on.
Well, and by the way, even one of the other things that Bettman said was along the lines of, well, when this happened, they weren't on NHL rosters. It doesn't matter. They were all drafted.
Right. They are all
they're property of an NHL team at the moment this happens. So
they're all currently making millions of dollars in your league.
It's not because they don't really make they currently are. I'm saying they don't at the time of what happened. They were not actively making the money unless they were playing in the league.
No, I know.
But nonetheless, it's again, it's a privilege to be tied to an NHL franchise. Act accordingly, and listen, I do hope, for the sake of, because there's a lot of conversation about, because one of the other pieces that there's a lot of conversation about is that at one point in time, the report had 8 people involved in this, and now it's 5 or whatever, and you got people who are out there going, who are the other 3? We must know, or whatever it is. And the problem is that has the potential to follow around the entire roster, even if you had an alibi.
Yeah, absolutely. The only
Cale Makar is a perfect example. Cale Makar had a backstory, wasn't at the thing,
literally was not in the same province,
but he was on that team, and that still will follow him, being teammates with that. I also one of the other things also is that because there's people who sit there and we're gonna have, it's the same conversation as with the Chicago Blackhawks, with how many, who knew what were you, whatever.
It's the Watergate. What did they know? When did they know it?
Well, here's where I'm going with that. The Dylan Dubé statement.
Yeah,
because obviously now that doesn't look good, right?
Well, and the Calgary Flames have come out since and issued a statement that says, well, we are now aware of.
Which quite frankly dug a hole worse.
Yes, because that means one of two things. Your player lied to you, or you knew and now you're just digging yourself deeper because you're lying about the fact that you knew.
It wouldn't be that bad of a look for the organization if the player lied about it, because here's the truth of the matter. And I saw a lot of people saying this. If Dylan Dubé requested and was granted a leave of absence from the Calgary Flames and cited mental health as his reason, they can't ask any questions about it. It's a no question. If you're granted, it's a no questions asked thing. You need it for your mental health. Okay, fine. Whether he's telling the truth or not about that.
Turns out
it's the fact that they came back with the follow-up and said, we were not previously aware. You're kidding, right? What, we've been under a rock for the last 2 years?
Headline: player charged with sexual assault might not be great person.
Well, and beyond that, it has nothing to do with that. I'm saying, if the team's going to sit there and say, we were not previously aware, you were not aware that there were, was a roster full of players of which you had one that was at least subject to a possible trial. What rock were you all living under?
Right. If you're a team in the NHL and you don't know that roster backward, every GM in the league should be able to list that roster backwards and forwards, and if they have any players on it.
let's be realistic for a second. This is going to transition us out of this to more Flyers.
Yeah,
related
we
stuff.
are going to get into lighter topics here towards the second half.
Well, I don't know if lighter might not be the right word, but
slightly
more
less
more hockey
dreadful.
related topics, I guess, right?
Slightly less dreadful.
But like, okay, but like, let's here's the point. In hindsight, knowing what we know now about this, and that Carter Hart's got a charge at, one charge of sexual assault, that he's been charged with this, and
Right.
he's got lawyers making statements for him, and he's on a leave and all that stuff, right? Do you think that the Flyers didn't know that there was a possibility this was coming? When you consider that over the offseason they signed Sam Ersson to a 2-year extension 1 year before they had to. They made a trade with a team, yes, to get draft picks, but also, go ahead and throw in your $5 million goaltender, because you never know, we may need him.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you.
Why did they draft 2 goalies at the draft? Because there's an element where even if you're going to sit there and say we didn't know, when, that's fair. You
right.
know
of
what?
course you didn't know when.
This was a ticking time bomb that was kind of like, we sat there and said during the offseason we thought this was going to happen, and that was also possibly the reason why his name was on the block too.
And we heard this summer that the list was coming, right? The investigation was, getting close to completing, and
right,
et cetera, et cetera. We heard all summer. We talked about it on this show all summer. Oh, is it this week? Oh, is it this week? Oh, when?
Because there was reason to believe it was going to be. That's
exactly
why there was a lot of stuff that was saying it was going to be. And
in the meantime, the Flyers are requiring Cal Peterson and drafting 2 goalies and this and that. And I understand why they can't legally talk about it, why they can't legally blah, blah, blah. But man, part of you hopes that if the team knew, they would have benched the guy. They would have sat him. They would have cut him. They would have done something as soon as and I know why they didn't. I know it's legal. It's contracts.
Well, they also can't until there's something out there either. Like, you're going to...
Why not? Okay, but you're not contractually obligated to play him. You could, if you wanted, run Ersson Peterson all season. And I'm not, again, I know why they didn't.
It's not, to me, it's not that simple. Like, it's just not, because...
I don't know, man. On a human level,
I don't find it that simple when there was nothing out there that actually put names to it. Because
but just because there's nothing out there doesn't mean that they didn't know.
Hold on.
Because if it comes out that they knew, and I'm not saying for sure that they did, but I don't see any world where they don't know. At least have some inkling.
Okay, inkling maybe, but again, I don't think anybody knew as much to the extent that you're thinking, because even Bettman said that the league's investigation, they did not talk to any other the teams individually. They conducted that as a league thing, and nobody I'm
talking about the police investigation more than anything.
Yeah, but even then, I don't think that the police is going to be, again, you didn't have any what investigation to an extent. You're talking about an investigation that at one point in time was closed and then reopened.
Yeah. And then reopened under severe public scrutiny.
Regardless, though, then everybody's dropping the ball on it. You know what I mean? Like we're sitting here now putting, you're trying to put the focus on, well, what if the team knew? Why roll him out there? Well, then why close the case and then reopen it?
I mean, to get justice in that case, like the reason there,
rightfully so, but they still. But my point is that, so then why even go that far with it then? Because same thing. There was, there wasn't, as far as you knew, there wasn't grounds to do anything. So it's done.
To me, it comes down to the fact that when Danny Briere knows it's a possibility enough that he has to sign Sam Ersson a year early, that he has to go acquire Cal Peterson.
The Ersson one is not as like...
I agree with that. He's just a good young player that they were probably going to...
I think they did that because they genuinely like him. The Peterson one was...
Quite frankly, it's good for the team that they did that before the season started, because he would have made himself... He would have doubled his salary.
Well, and beside the point, before we had like a possible, this is coming out thing, the Ersson got enough playing time that everybody knew that the team liked him. Yep. So I don't think it had anything to do with, this is potential. Like, I think they just wanted him around to be around.
Yeah.
The Peterson one was what set everything. Well, and here's the thing too. The Peterson thing set it off because it was they acquired a goalie. Why would they do that? And then also on the same day, you had people saying, well, there's a possibility that Carter Hart gets moved too.
Right.
Now, and as much as you can cite the investigation process as something here, there was also the belief that the team was a month out from the New Era press conference, and it was like, oh, they're going. They said rebuild, they meant it. They're trading the goalie.
Yeah, but I wonder if the reason they didn't trade the goalie is because the goalie is damaged goods.
Well, sure, because what I'm trying to get at is that
Right.
you don't know to what extent is maybe is the point. It didn't matter to what extent, because you could have been a player who wasn't named in this thing, and I don't know that you were moving right away.
That's fair.
Because you're tied to it. It's still part of that's still part of it.
Until people are explicitly clear.
Right. Tough. Like my point is that as much as you could hear a bunch of things about how maybe Hart was involved in this or whatever, you didn't have anything that formally attached his name to it other than that he was on the team, which is probably what held everything up to begin with, regardless of whether, that's what I mean to the extent of people knowing too.
Sure. Well, and in the initial
what you do know is he was on that team. So I guess and he was at the event. So I guess there's a possibility.
Right. Well, and in the initial batch of statements, it was he denied any wrongdoing through a statement from his attorney.
Because what would you expect?
Of course. Okay. In an attempt to put a pin into this and kind of move into some lighter topics, like I said, we may touch on it next week if the London police say anything interesting on Monday, but we will get into that. In an attempt to put a pin in this, I'm going to make a joke and say that it has been an awful year for jersey sales in the Philadelphia area, because there's a whole lot of Carter Hart jerseys at every game. For years, there was a whole lot of Ivan Provorov jerseys at every game.
Ivan Provorov jerseys. Yep. That was okay. And this is one of the last
that ended up working out well.
But this is one of the last things I want to mention about this, because this is one of the things that.
I've already seen people flipping 79 jerseys.
No, I know, but I'm saying this is one of the things that you feel really horrible about now that you know that there's a charge attached and there's a lawyer statement and all that.
Yep.
Is one of the hardest parts with this. And obviously, again, the main goal here is justice for the victim.
Are you going to mention the jersey number?
What's that?
Are you going to mention the jersey number?
No, it has nothing to do with the jersey number. It's not that. It's
because that whole thing's kind of slimy now too.
Oh, like what? The idea of that number?
Well, and you heard the whole thing about why he has that number and the kid with the
Well, that part. Okay, so a little bit because obviously, aside from thinking about the victim in all of this and what she has to deal with and reliving this every time they need testimony or whatever, right? Like that in and of itself is horrific enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sitting there thinking about if with Carter Hart's alleged involvement in this, and now that a charge has been filed, like you sit there and you start thinking about like maybe more than any prospect recently, this was a guy that I think people got to know more about. You knew a lot about, like
he was beloved.
No, beyond that, it's just they highlighted his parents. You're thinking about like how do you think his parents feel finding this out? Or how much did they know? He brings up his billet all the time.
Yep.
Like things like that. You sit there and you go, it felt like we knew more about this. And then what I really feel bad for is, and this has no direct tie to Carter Hart specifically.
Yeah.
But it's the influence that, you're a goaltender.
Yep.
You have a very unique number for a goaltender. And how many times do you think you'll see as you go to a local rink somewhere that the goalie's wearing number 79 because that's, whatever. The hard part with some of this is that, and I've seen people talk about this on social a little bit, is as rightfully so as it is that he's not playing, he's on leave, he probably won't be a Flyer or an NHLer beyond this, as far as we know. Trying to explain to 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids
how we got here.
How the player that for the last several years, as long as they maybe have known, I mean, let's face it, he's been in the league right.
Yes, he's been in the league for 6 years. As long as they've been alive.
Right.
There's kids in first grade who have never known any other Flyers goaltender.
And beyond that, even like that's why I even throw in the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, because okay, fine, you were 2 or 3 when he made his debut.
Right.
He's still the only goaltender you probably know. If you as you're growing up, if you're that age group and this is your hero, right? This is your hero, and you find out that your hero's not what you think he is.
Not a good person,
and
like again, objectively not a good person,
right?
If this is true,
and I do like I feel for the parents of people, like of kids of that age group that are sitting there going, I don't know where to start with this because and again, it kind of goes back to tying it all together. It's uncomfortable conversations, but and it's especially like to me, that's also especially like it's going to be especially uncomfortable, not in the cringe way, uncomfortable in the way where it's like it's hard to explain to kids who are 8, 9 years old and say
why Carter Hart's not around anymore.
First, well, especially in light of how it happened.
It's like explaining divorce, man.
Right.
It's like,
right.
Man.
It's as well, and especially in light of how quickly it happened, that he was backing up on a Sunday and Tuesday he's not on the team anymore.
He went out to get milk. He went out to get milk and never came back. Okay. Like I said, gonna try to get into lighter topics here.
You wanted to put a pin in it. You sure as hell just did with that comment. Wow.
Carter Hart jerseys are disappearing from the Farg. Ivan Provorov jerseys are disappearing from the Farg.
By the way, for what it's worth, I think some of the other online outlets still had them for a little.
I know. Anyway.
No, one of the things we didn't talk about last week, the Stadium Series jerseys came out.
Oh yeah.
No. They sure as hell made sure that any store in the center did not have them.
I bet they did.
Like you can get anybody else. You want to get your Jamie Drysdale jersey? Go right ahead. You want to get your Travis Konechny, your Flyers All-Star this year. We'll get to him.
Another jersey that I'm sure you could get, but there's a chance you may not be able to get it for very long.
Yeah, you want to get into this? Whoop. Great minds think alike.
Yes. Apparently, allegedly, to use that term in a little bit of a lighter
fashion
circumstance, apparently Danny Briere has, as he has done for basically the last several months here, has remained open and is taking phone calls on Scott Laughton. Now, if you're paying attention around the NHL, Elias Lindholm got moved over the All-Star break.
And
everyone else kind of looked around and went, there's not a lot of centers left on the market, are there?
There weren't to begin with, to be honest. He was the centerpiece.
And then Lindholm disappears, and you look around and go, okay, who else is there? And it dries up real quick. And all of a sudden, Scott Laughton is a valued asset here.
What year was? I feel like there was a year fairly recently where free agency was kind of boring because everybody found out where everybody was going, like in the 12 hours before it really hit.
Yeah, that was the last year they had the tampering period.
Right. Okay.
I think it was 2017.
I'm seeing like the reason I'm bringing that up is because I'm seeing a lot of who said the trade deadline's March 8th. There's not going to be a trade deadline. Everybody just decided, forget it. We're doing it a month early.
Well, I think there's more and more data to suggest that having a player for 40 games is better than having a player for 22 games.
Well, there is.
When it comes to integrating them into your system, when it comes to you're adding a better player. Theoretically, he makes your roster better. So getting them earlier will make your roster better earlier. But even just for system integration more than anything.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about from the receiving end. I'm also trying to think from the seller perspective where it's like, maybe there's just an emphasis on, listen, the risk is not worth the push, I guess, at that point, meaning the risk of losing a player for absolutely nothing is not worth, let's take a shot at this because it's not technically out of reach. Like the Calgary Flames have over a month until the trade deadline. They're 5 points out of a playoff spot. And with the way the Western Conference has been all over the place. I mean, for goodness sake, you've got a team that is talk about not slow news days over the All-Star break, by the way, right? Like in addition to all the trades that you're mentioning or whatever, the team that is holding the first, not the second, the first wild card spot fired their coach.
Yep. And Michael Bublé may or may not be on mushrooms.
Well, that was totally different.
we'll get into wild card stuff, but
that's the story the story that comes out when it is a slow news day.
Right.
Not the LA Kings fired their coach and an All-Star got traded to another
and
team.
Elias Lindholm got traded, right? So if you're Danny Briere,
right,
and someone calls you and says, "Hey, I like Scott. What do you want for him?" If it's just a first round pick from a team that's going to lose in the first round, right? If it's a pick that you expect somewhere to be between 16 and 20, are you taking that for Scott Laughton at this point in time?
You said a first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. The bar is a first. If Colorado
If
calls off.
somebody's offering you a first round pick, especially this year, like that soon, for Scott Laughton, you're taking it, or you should.
Man, I feel like Colorado. I just said Colorado kind of off the cuff there. I feel like that makes a ton of sense. Holy.
Sure, it does.
Holy. Imagine that penalty killing unit with Scott Laughton, Bowen Byram's.
This is such a worthy conversation because we've had a chance to sit for a week and process the last handful of games that the team has played and where they're at and all of that. It's an interesting conversation to have because you asked last week, where did optimistic Kevin go?
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of time to think about where they are right now. And I'm not trying to tell you that it's gone completely.
It shouldn't be.
Well, I've already said on multiple occasions, they've earned the chance to get this back on track, just like they did going into the new year when they lost a few games. They've earned that chance.
Absolutely.
But if they don't get this corrected and in a hurry, they're not going to be in the playoff picture for much longer because you can't expect for now
other teams to keep losing.
Well, because for now, the thing that's benefited them is that over the course of this 5-game losing streak, nobody in the Metro has been good.
Yeah.
And that's allowed them to survive in third place in the division. Like the only team I can think of that really came on as of late is Carolina was really turning it around at the right, like going into this break.
Right.
And as such, not only took over second place, but remember the Flyers at one point in time were 2 points out of first. Now
Carolina
there's 7.
Is.
Well, no, right. Carolina currently is, and the Flyers are 7 points behind the Rangers and 5 behind Carolina now. That may be the only two teams that kind of got it figured out with enough time.
That's
to
the
take
top
advantage.
2 in the division.
Yeah. Well, I know, but I'm saying that may be the only two teams that got it figured out and with enough time to take advantage of what the Flyers weren't doing. You know,
I agree.
Everybody else behind them, though, like you're sitting there going, the Islanders didn't win enough.
Nope.
Pittsburgh didn't win enough. New Jersey didn't win enough. Washington didn't win enough. The only thing that is really worth paying attention to with those, because New Jersey's the one that stands out to me more than anything. New Jersey has 3 games in hand on the Flyers and is supposedly, probably as soon as the first game after the break, getting Jack Hughes back.
And they just lost 2 of their biggest young prospects in a devastating fashion.
What, because of the...
Yeah.
No,
that's the kind of thing that sucks the life out of the room, man. I'm telling you.
I think Jack Hughes coming back injects a whole lot more of it back in.
That is, you know what? That is entirely valid. And I think if the Devils were a deeper team, like honestly, what was Michael McLeod was playing second line center for them?
At one point in time, he was 4th.
Okay,
I thought so. Like that's why I'm kind of struggling enough. Because I'm going Cal Foote at most nights couldn't even get into the lineup.
No, that part's fair. Yeah, he has struggled.
And as far as I know, like, all right, maybe. Well, once you
bounced around a little bit.
Hold on. Once you put Hughes back into the picture, then their center depth looks better because it's Hischier, Hughes, and right now it says Curtis Lazar, Chris Tierney, Justin Dowling. All right.
I just mean McLeod's a guy who played a bunch of big minutes because both Hischier and Hughes have been hurt over the last couple of years. But
right, McLeod was having, like, honestly, all things considered, was having a solid year. All things considered, up to that point, like
so was Carter Hart.
Well, sure. But like, you get my point. Like, I think that them getting it's because it's not just them getting a player back, it's the caliber of
the fact that it's Jack Hughes.
Right. Jack Hughes is an outstanding elite player in this league, and the fact that they are once again within striking distance with the games in hand that they have. Yeah. Like I don't know of anything with Pittsburgh or Washington where you sit there and you say, well, this guy's coming back, so that'll make a difference. They are what they are. It's what you decide to do with your roster.
Sid's doing his best to will Pittsburgh into the playoffs, though.
Sid is. I mean, Gensel is. Because Gensel's had a decent year. Like,
yep.
I can tell you what.
But I just know Dubas is itching to trade Gensel. I just know it. He's itching to pull the plug on this and fire everybody into the sun.
But here's the thing: they're a weird team too because they're 5 points out of a playoff spot also, and
with a roster full of their guys that their GM does not have any sort of attachment to.
With a roster that went out and added Erik Karlsson that
other than him.
Well, no. That added Erik Karlsson, thinking that would improve the team defense? I mean, the guy is he might as well be a forward. And that's the weird part, right? Like they've got, first of all, they've got 4 games in hand on the Flyers, which is massive.
Yeah.
But they've got a +12 goal differential. Like they shouldn't be a team that's lost more games than they've won with that.
Well, because when they're scoring in absolute heaps.
Droves, yeah.
Right. And that kind of skews your goal differential.
Well, like this is the thing too. Like I look at the opposite end of the spectrum and I go, you're talking about a team that still, by the way, on the other hand, Washington that still has Alex Ovechkin, still has John Carlson, still has Oshie, still has like a whole bunch of, still has Tom Wilson who can
guys who can theoretically turn it up over these last 35.
That team's got a -31 goal differential. I want to know how, when you've played 47 games and are a -31 goal differential, that you're supposed to make the playoffs.
You're not.
Right. That's why I say I consider them a non-threat. You want to talk to me about Pittsburgh or New Jersey because Pittsburgh's got a +12 goal differential and has time to make this thing up? Fine. You want to talk to me about New Jersey getting Jack Hughes back? Fine. You even want to convince me that maybe because they're only 4 points behind that the Islanders under Patrick Waugh, still weird to say, by the way.
And they've been fairly hot since they got Patrick.
Well, no, they have. I mean, they've been okay. Like they're 1-2-1. Yeah. So they haven't exactly, that's not a team that's exactly grabbed hold of the reins and said, let's get back in this thing. Like it's quite possible that, and the Islanders don't have a lot of extra games to be played. They're at 49.
Right.
So
they're
same
right up
thing
against
with
the Flyers here.
So same thing with the teams that are behind them. That to me, the team that's the biggest threat to this right now is Jersey.
Yep.
And then probably Pittsburgh.
So
I know.
If
we
that's
need to get to the trade deadline conversation.
Right. If that's the case, does that prevent you from selling? Like if you're looking at you're still willing to take pieces off of the current roster?
Because I don't think, like, grand scheme of things, let's take the other piece that's been out there the most. Laughton's going to be number 2 in this, obviously, because now you have more formal reports that say that, like, essentially sound like he's being shopped more than just taking calls.
Right.
Like if you're taking, if it's out there that you're taking calls, you're kind of shopping. Right.
Right.
So the other name
sounds like
that
you're courting calls.
Right. So the other name that I guess would be in the similar situation is Sean Walker, because his name's been out there for a while.
Right. Well, and that one makes a little more sense because, like, to a certain extent, you do just have 8 defensemen.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, if you move Sean Walker and try to get as much as humanly possible for him in a trade, what does it do to your current roster now that you've added Jamie Drysdale? It does nothing.
I mean, it does. It does because you give somebody worse more ice time, right? You give Nick Seeler more ice time, or Mark Stahl, or Rasmus Ristolainen. Somebody who hasn't been as good as Sean Walker this year will get more ice time.
I don't know that Sealer's been much like that. Sealer or Ristolainen have been much worse than Walker.
I don't know. I think Walker's been pretty decent.
Walker's leveled off a lot more in the last few weeks. That's what I'm trying to get at. And like,
then if you want to ride the perceived notion that his value is still higher, then I'm fine with that.
Well, there's also a reason for that. And I've seen, like, Anthony DeMarco's had a lot of good stuff on this. Because he's really been following the Walker angle of this, that the asking price is a first for him, that there's a good potential that nothing really happens with this until Chris Tanev moves, because that's probably the top defenseman on the market. That like why is Laughton's name coming up? Because Elias Lindholm got traded.
Yep. Like there's a vacuum.
Well, and then by the way, it wasn't just Elias Lindholm. This was the move, because Lindholm got moved a couple days earlier than this. So the same day that LA fired McClellan and put that news out there, Sean Monahan got traded. To Winnipeg, and
that was the other big center.
But again, somehow you got two trades that make that the case, right?
That's a great little load up deal for Winnipeg, by the way. Like that is Sean Monahan is exactly the kind of player that
but I
help them.
You got to give flowers to Kent Hughes for putting on a masterclass of asset management to say to Calgary when they got Monahan. Okay, we'll take the contract. We want a first also. Just to take the contract, fine. And then turning him into a first So they got 2 first-round picks for taking on his contract and then moving him. That's brilliance. I mean, but it does with Laughton. It does kind of now set the market that if you are because the center market's so thin, if you're an available center, a first is kind of where it's at, because and really, like, Lindholm getting a first was expected. He's an all-star level player. Monahan really sets the tone for that, because now that Monahan drew a first, you're sitting there looking, and like the parallels are too good at this point to sit there and say, listen, you're getting a jack of all trades player who can play center.
I'm looking it up here. Do you know if Colorado has their first round pick this year?
I will double check it just to make sure, but I believe I just looked at this the other day, and I believe that they do.
Okay. I wouldn't be surprised. Joe Sakic is a careful guy, and
Sakic and Chris McFarland.
I know he's the president of hockey ops,
right? Who's now the GM of the team? Who
they don't. Oh, so they do have their first, but they don't have their second or third. So they may be a little hesitant to.
Depends.
But if they think Scott Laughton can help them win a cup, then you go for it. You go for it.
Well, because guess what? They don't have a second in 25 either. They do have their third there. But a third's not getting this done when 2 guys just went for a first.
Especially not next year's third. No, sir. Nope.
Right.
A player that we won't see for
about the only
4 years.
About the only thing that you could maybe convince is you want to go first and don't want to go this year's first, then next year's.
Sure.
And even so, like, the Flyers are now in a very, like, between Walker and Laughton alone, and the idea that they're thinking that maybe they could get first from. I'm a little like, and I had somebody ask me what they think getting. Like, I legitimately think that yes, based on track record now, you can get a first for Scott Laughton. The market is dictating as such. Walker, I'm thinking a little bit more like, listen, you can ask for a first. I think you need to find a team with a second.
I think that's fair, and you might be able to pick up a reasonable prospect kind of in that stead.
But I do want to say that but even if it is a second, whether this year or next year for that matter, and Laughton maybe is a first, right? Let's just say those, and let's say that those are the only 2 pieces you want to move, because let's not forget Nick Seeler. They kind of have expressed an interest in keeping him.
Yep.
Okay, we'll see where that goes. Like, listen, that also can change depending on where your team's going. One of the things I even said is a month ago, you had a lot more figured out because you thought you had Cutter Gauthier in your future and you had Carter Hart on the roster.
Yep.
Your goaltending situation was solid. You had a center, a bona fide top 6 center in the pipeline.
And both of those things are different.
And both of those things are gone. And while you turned the potential top 6 forward prospect into active NHLer with top line potential, or top pairing potential, I mean.
And the second round pick.
Well, yeah, the second round pick is nice also, but
it's not nothing.
I think I'm trying to talk about from what, like, without having used the picks yet.
Right.
So you don't have a really good center prospect in the pipeline at this point. And now you need to figure out your goaltending again.
Yep. Because Sam Erson's a good goalie, but he's not going to be, he shouldn't be starting 55, 60 games in the NHL.
No, realistically, unless your name is Andrei Vasilevsky
very few guys
or Igor Shesterkin, you probably shouldn't be at all.
Or Connor Hellebuck.
You're right. But at the moment, they have 2 first rounders this year. They have, here's how I'm going to color this. They have 1 second rounder. That's the compensatory pick that they get for
the Jay O'Brien.
For the Jay O'Brien thing.
Yeah.
They have a conditional second rounder for this year. That's Columbus's, but let's face it, with where Columbus is, it's going to be a high second rounder. That's probably
going to kick it the next year.
Right. So let's call it 1 second rounder this year and 2 first rounders. And next year they have their first round pick currently. And what would become, assuming Columbus kicks the can down the road on that one, 3 second rounders. Now imagine that you get and this is why I think also with Laughton, if someone's willing to offer you a first, whether this year or next year, you take it. You're either going to get yourself a 3rd first round pick this year or a 2nd next year and give yourself multiple opportunities in the first round, one way or the other.
Okay.
If Sean Walker is a 2nd rounder this year, I'm very satisfied because I'm assuming I don't have a second rounder right now.
Okay.
So I would then be coming to the table with 4 picks in the first 2 rounds this year and potentially 5 in the first 2 rounds the next year. And this is before, like right now, we're just talking Laughton and Walker. Their names are now out there. I think it's safe to say at minimum that they'll sell a little bit, and that's,
and those names are like reasonable, right?
Well, yeah, it's
I do think there's a chance that if they come out of this break and stabilize, I think there's a chance they decide to keep Laughton. If they win 8 out of the first 11, I think there's a chance they keep Scott Laughton.
Here's where I'm at with that. Well, I'll get to where I'm at with him, but it's very practical to say if you sell those two players and are still in the race, you still maybe have enough left to take a shot at it.
Yeah, but I just mean for the room. I just mean for the room more than anything.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Scott Laughton is the only guy John Tortorella has given a letter to.
Oh, I know. I'm not trying to take away from the significance of that. What I'm trying to say is that I know where you're coming from. That if they're still winning and if they're still in the playoff position,
it's hard to give up on the guys.
Well, it's hard to, but I think you could still sell modestly with those two players, let's say, and still not take yourself out of play.
I'm not going to fight you on Walker, but I don't know, man. I think Laughton is a lot.
I just think that when you're hearing things like this, especially with the fact that the market's thin,
I'm not saying they're not going to do it.
Well, here's what it is too for me. I guess they're shopping him as a center because the center market's thin. He's not even playing center on this team,
right? And
so what are you
really
losing?
Played a whole lot of center recently.
Right. So what are you losing at this point? Oh, but all right. But let's just consider. You're playing the other card. You're playing the what if they win 8 out of 11 coming back, right?
And if they lose 8 out of 11, then I think
so I'm going to give you the other way, which is that they continue to fall in the standings, and it starts to look like the best move is that it's best to move more than just the two players that we're hearing about the most. Like again, Nick Seeler. Maybe keeping him made more sense a month ago if you moved Walker and felt like you had more put together on your blue line. I'm going to throw, I still think, by the way, because I'll throw two names into the mix that I think their futures are in question. I do think they're going to be better off-season moves than trade deadline moves, but I think you're going to hear a lot about Cam Atkinson in the offseason. And I think you're going to hear some about Nick Delorier as well, even though he's got a no-move clause.
Yeah,
I think you're going to hear some stuff about him, and one way or the other. By the way, could be I hate to say it, could be buyout.
Okay, is it a no trade or a no move?
I believe it was no move. I'll double check that while I have cap front.
Chuck.
Well, all right. Hold on, modified, so it's not impossible.
Okay, is it a modified no trade?
Yes.
Oh, so they can buy him out if they want. Okay, no problem. Okay, I thought it was a no move, and they couldn't. Or they couldn't waive.
No, modified no trade. Yeah, no.
Okay.
The only player. So, Atkinson has a modified no trade as well.
Okay.
But I think he would understand. Cam Atkinson's about as straightforward a guy as you can find in that room.
And he's still on the Columbus contract, right? Like that's not even a contract you signed. So.
Correct.
Okay.
Travis Sanheim got a no trade clause in his
contract, which makes a lot of sense at this point.
And Sean Couturier has the no move clause.
Yep.
But that's really it. I mean, nobody else's contract, as far as I know.
I'm sure Travis Sanheim doesn't.
No, Sanheim has no move. You're saying?
Yeah.
It doesn't have a no move. He's got no trade.
A no trade. Yeah.
Like Cal Peterson's got a modified no trade as well, and I believe that it's not going to be listed here because I guess it's not kicked in yet. But we talked about last week that Tippett's new contract is going to have it is a modified no trade in the middle of that.
For the middle 4 years.
Right, for the middle 4 years of the 8. So there you go. Anyway, let's get this back on the rails for a second.
Yeah.
Because I want to bring another name into this, and this is kind of going to tie part of where we're going for the rest of the show too. Travis Konechny.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
And I'm going to tell you why.
Because you're going to get an absolute pile for him if you decide to move him.
Because look at the package that Elias Lindholm just fetched.
Just an absolute pile.
And this is important too, because you do have to start. Something else you have to figure out is basically who's on the roster next year. Definitively start asking yourself that question. And here's the thing and we've already talked about this, so I'm going to hit these quick and then get kind of to where Konechny's name comes into this picture a little bit. you have a lot figured out defensively to an extent. Sanheim's on a long-term deal. You just acquired Drysdale, so you're definitely keeping him.
Yep.
Cam York's in this.
Ristolainen's locked up.
Well, I'll get to
York's
Risto, but
there.
Cam York and Igor Zamula have taken some good steps, so you're probably going to continue to work with them. Emil Andre's in the system, Addard and Ginning in the system. Oliver Bonk and June.
I don't see how keeping Nick Seeler makes sense at this point, but okay. I know they're talking about it, but whatever.
Here, hold on.
Yep.
I think it makes sense if you think that you like when you looked at this team and that they were a lot more like this team was a lot more of a lock to make the playoffs a month ago than they are now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And at that time, if you're looking at that and saying we can rebuild, but we could also be competitive, and Nick Seeler is what's helping us do that and really good for the room, then yes, I think I understand how you're maybe picking Seeler over Walker and saying that's who we're going to keep as the veteran guy.
Right. He's been here a little bit longer. Who knows?
He'll be a little cheaper. I don't think Ristolainen's a guy you're able to move at the deadline because the contract's so hard to work.
Maybe next year, but not this year.
Well, no, I think it's a contract you explore you would explore moving in the offseason if you wanted to go there, because teams can prepare for it differently. You can sit there and say, listen, were you going to sign a guy to this contract, or do you want a defenseman who can realistically, is a really good third pairing guy, but could probably play second and is making $5.1 million for the next 3 years?
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it's a lot easier to sell. So Ristolainen's more of a wild card in that spot. I brought up that Bonk is still in juniors at this point and having a killer second half of his season.
Fantastic.
You're probably drafting another defenseman at some point with all those draft picks that I mentioned. So they've got pieces in there now and in the future. So as you know, we know, as much as we know that they would like to keep Nick Seeler, you have to start asking that tough question about what's smarter to do. Like, that's why, like you just said, go to forward now, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Sean Couturier's locked up long-term.
Yep.
You have a longer
long-term.
You brought what, Tippett?
Yeah.
Okay. I was getting him third.
Okay.
You have a longer contract for Joel Farabee.
Yep.
He's around for the next few years. It's Ryan Poehling just got a new contract, so he's part of this for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Or at least for the next year plus.
Valid.
Tyson Forrester and Noah Cates appear to be part of it because they have consistently been a part of it. Perhaps if things are saved for Morgan Frost and his relationship with John Tortorella, maybe he's part of it.
Yeah, I don't.
But there's not exactly convincing evidence there.
Yeah, I don't think you can write that one down in pen.
No, I'm penciling it in because I think some things have taken steps, but
I think it's gotten better. Honestly, I think Morgan Frost yelling at him kind of helped.
Well, hang on a minute here. Here's the reason. Again, the reason why I'm saying there's not convincing evidence either is because on one hand, you're thin at center and the center market's thin, and I don't think you want to get thinner at center. Like I think it makes more sense to say trade Scott Laughton, who you're not using as a center, that somebody else is going to consider a center, and maybe hand you a first-round pick for him.
Absolutely.
I don't know that that's how people are going to feel about Frost.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying pull back on that one for a second. But really, in mentioning those names, that's really only 6 guys I feel confident in mentioning in the here and now. And none of the younger guys in that picture, other than Frost, who I don't actually think I considered it. Yeah, I didn't really consider even in it. I went Couturier, Farabee, Tippett, Poehling, Forrester, Cates. None of the 6 that's younger is a center. Like, Couturier is a center, but he's not younger anymore. Poehling is, but let's be real about what Poehling's role is. So none of them are that middle 6 or top 6 center. You thought you had an answer in Cutter Gauthier. Now you don't.
Right.
Okay, go to goalie. There's another position where you were starting to feel comfortable. Carter Hart, Sam Harrison, nice rotation. They play off each other well. Good balance.
You got some good young prospects that you're kind of excited about long term.
Right. Well, now that's gone. And while you do have, you have Alexei Kolosov, who signed his ELC. By the way, another move about remember the whole line of goalie moves? That's another one that you sit there and go, they got that guy locked up to his ELC. Really? They wanted to make sure that was done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have 2 goalies that you drafted in the last year. I think also, by the way, from the goalies last year, I think Bjarnason signed his ELC too, didn't he?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so Bjarnason signed as well.
Yep.
So 2 of them are signed.
A lot of urgency around the goalie position for a team with a 25 and a 23-year-old.
Well, I don't know. I think you're not. I don't think you were as much as you signed him like you were. I don't think you like. Let's be real about what 1.5 million represents for Sam Harrison. We like you. No, but we like you a lot, but we're not convinced yet.
Valid.
Not completely. I think again, he's shown signs he can be a starter. Can he be a franchise? That remains to be seen.
Okay.
This is, if nothing else, this is where you find that information out.
You're
Probably
not wrong. Yeah, because as long as you're in the playoff race, he's going to start a lot
right. I mean,
of games.
Truthfully, if they find a way to, considering where they're at and how they've lost a little bit and all that stuff like that, they make the playoffs this year with him as the number one guy. You start to feel a lot more comfortable about that answer.
You start to vote him for the Hart
That's
Trophy.
for sure. But I don't go that far. But the bottom line is the outlook has changed a lot in the last few weeks. And to me, this is where we find out just how much power Danny Briere and Keith Jones have in this. And if this is their show and they are the ones calling the shots, and everything that they've been telling you to this point is stay the course ahead, stay on the course, despite the fact that you've had some unexpected success, then it may be best to be sellers and open for business and not get caught up in the standings. I likened them to the Washington Capitals last year, and the Capitals were different. They're still playing, squeeze every last ounce out of Alex Ovechkin and the core that's there. I get it.
Yep.
But they also had the foresight that despite the fact that they were within 3 points of a playoff spot with 8 days to go until the trade deadline, we're just going to go ahead and ship out the best defenseman probably the best defenseman that was on the market.
Right.
We're just going to set the market now and just go.
Yep. And I do think that is something that the Flyers may look to do if they are.
I think you gotta.
Yeah, but I don't know
to what extent. We'll see.
I don't know if Danny Briere is willing to give them some leash. I mean, obviously he has. Well, he hasn't made a move here.
That's
right? He didn't
where
make a move over All-Star weekend,
right.
So he clearly is willing to give them some amount of leash here coming out of it.
But it's the difference between moving Walker and maybe Laughton, because Laughton's kind of played on the bottom six, and as much as you like the leadership in the room, and as much as you like his his veteran presence and all that stuff, and his versatility,
I think Walker.
If Laughton's bringing in a first round pick, especially when Walker's not a guarantee to, I just find it hard to walk away from the table.
I know,
especially considering. I mean, let's put it this way: whether it was true or not, because it was a report.
Okay.
Whether it was true or not that he had a first round pick on the table for Laughton in the offseason or not, the reaction to that is enough to sit there and tell you, if it happens again, you may not want to walk away this time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you're just really being pushed. Konechny is the guy that I sit there and I say, that's the one that I am so hesitant. And this is the story I wrote kind of going into the All-Star appearance that he had, because to me, he's at the forefront of the rebuild now.
Yeah.
Because you know what decision you face. You either are
he's either in or he's out.
Well, he's either in or he's out, and he's either out as one of your probably your biggest selling asset at this point.
Yep.
That he's an all-star forward who's got 30, consistently 30 goal potential, 60 to 70 point potential,
has shown flashes of the potential to do more,
has become more of a leader, is a gritty guy, is a edgy player, all of those qualities. By the way,
gaining some reputation as one of the better chirper kind of disturbers in the league.
I was going to go a different direction. Is gaining a reputation now as a guy who plays in all situations. This is a guy who didn't kill penalties until John Tortorella was here.
That too.
Now he's a shorthanded specialist practically.
Oh, John Tortorella has made Travis Konechny so much money on his next contract.
You're not kidding about that.
Holy.
And that's also what's looming, right? Is
that big next contract?
As of July, you can sign him.
Yep.
Because you're within a year of the.
And I think you almost have to, just given what he's done over the last couple of years. Like, you got to sign him early, because what if he comes out and scores 40 next year?
But that's what I'm saying. It's either you're selling this last year at minimum the last year, maybe and change, right, or you are re-signing him and he's part of the core.
Yep.
And again, the difference a month makes. A month ago, I'm telling you without hesitation, he's a Flyer for a long time.
Yep.
Because he's in this picture. Now I sit there and I go, you don't have a center prospect to build around. You may not, honestly, you may not have a number one defenseman to build around. You may have acquired a top pairing defenseman, but you may not have a number one.
I think you have two number two defensemen.
Possibly, but you would like that number one.
Of course. And okay. And
you may not have a franchise goalie.
Yep. Right. And this is something that, like I said, it looks at this point, Danny Briere hasn't made a move yet. It looks like he's going to give the team a little bit of a leash to to see where it plays out. If they win 3 of the first 4, maybe these conversations change.
Right. Well, but there's also my point is there's giving them the leash to get back on track in the playoff race, and there's also shooting for the playoffs in year one of a public rebuild when you just found out that literally in the last month, number one goalie's gone, and the top prospect center that everybody thought was going to solve a chunk of problems is gone too.
Yep.
Changes the whole picture.
Yep.
All-Star weekend.
Yes, I was going to say, we are on our way out of here. We're up against a little bit of a time crunch here, so we're going to breeze through All-Star weekend real quick. Okay.
Oh, there's not much to talk about. Which part do you want to talk about?
I'm going to talk you through the events, and you just hit me with a cool or lame, and then at the end, we can circle back and talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. There's not much because I didn't pay super close attention to it, obviously.
The jerseys, cool or lame?
Lame. Terrible.
Oh, disagree, but we'll talk about that. The player draft.
Okay.
Cool or lame? We'll come back to it. Cool or lame?
No. It's a 50-50 answer because I had the answer right away. It's a 50-50 answer. Here's the thing. The draft concept is very cool. I think it's outstanding to do that and mix players up and get combinations you don't normally have. It's so super scripted feels so super scripted that it's cringy.
I guess
the celebrity captains being there is cringy. The players trying to act like they don't know where they're going with their picks is cringy. Like, just stop.
You heard the mic'd up audio of Nathan McKinnon telling everybody else that Sid was off limits?
Sure.
Hilarious. Okay. Okay. So the All-Star or the skills competition. Cool or lame?
I liked it a lot better as an individual thing. Yeah.
I agree. I'm gonna go cool.
I mean, it sucks when you have players that your team, like that are representing your team, that may not participate. I get that.
I don't care.
But to put money on the line and then say, let McDavid and Pasternak and Matthew the fact that Matthews got the fact that Matthews got himself back into that thing and made it a competition again, even though it seemed like McDavid seemed like the obvious guy to win something like this, that was another night at the office for him to do things that he was trying to do on those skills, right? But
yeah,
but you get the point. I thought it had a unique aspect to it that made it a little bit more made it more entertaining than the games to some extent.
I was gonna say, and the games themselves, cool or lame? Are we?
I don't
3-on-3 format.
There's an element where I don't mind the 3-on-3. I know why they do it. It's what it is at this point. It's so blatantly obvious that certain players don't want to be there and would rather be on vacation.
Yeah.
I
almost wish the NHL would remove the penalties and just let guys skip it if they don't want to be there.
It's beyond letting guys skip it to an extent. It's I don't even know what its purpose is anymore because it's lost it's lost an element of being special. You might as well just hand out mid-season all-star awards and say you're an all-star this year based on what you've done halfway through and leave it at that. Because it's not even something that's that generates excitement anymore.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't think we really have time for a breakdown of the All-Star format right now. But
no, it's not even on the format. It's like I saw something that was brought up. I believe the commentary was really done by Frank Saravalli of Daily Faceoff about how Sidney Crosby didn't even go, was skating on an outdoor rink in Montana somewhere on Thursday and wasn't at the player draft because they don't care.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And it's like, if that's okay, then what are we doing here? To an extent, it honestly looked like, and I hate to go there with it too, because it's like the celebrity angle of it too. It's just cringy. It's just really cringy. It's like what the Pro Bowl has become too. I'm not saying the Pro Bowl was ever more than kind of a glorified thing, and the Super Bowl players don't even participate in it, but it's like, the Pro Bowl has no value anymore. To the point where, if I'm not mistaken,
the Pro Bowl sucks. It's flag.
Isn't it? Isn't it now? It didn't used to be, but that's my point. They've had to simplify it down to let's make it flag football, and because that's how little people want to be here. They've turned the NHL ones become that because it's let's make it 3-on-3 because they don't even have to give their all against three other players.
The thing is with football and in hockey, you play a different game because the game you normally play is so physically grueling that you don't want to do that for free on your time off as an exhibition in the middle of your regular season.
Well, and here's the catch, though. In the NFL, when you're in the Pro Bowl, it's the week before the Super Bowl. You're not giving up any part of your vacation. It's just delays it by a week.
And that's also guys who are just physically destroyed at the end of the season.
You just wish that, like, from the NHL standpoint, like, and this, I guess, ties into what you mentioned about what they announced over the weekend too.
No sport has a good all-star game. None of them. Baseball sucks. Basketball sucks. Football sucks. They all suck.
Because they've lost what made them unique in the first place.
Okay.
Honestly, they have. Yeah. Like, the one thing, and at this point, and I'm going to tell you right now, the Olympics and this little turn. The one downside to the little tournament they announced is that it's only the Four Nations thing, and you're wiping out half of Europe.
Yeah, like, you're only
like I'm sorry. You're supposed. They just said they're going to host this thing partially in Boston, and you're going to tell me that Boston's star player can't play in it.
Right.
Like, come on. And I get it. Okay, if you want to sit there and say because you were trying to figure out a solution for a year, for the year that led up to the Olympics, and it wasn't enough time to kind of figure out how to get more than 4 teams involved over a 10-day span.
Right.
All right, I hear you. It's not the World Cup, so I get it. The Olympics is going to be something real and something brings that element back. Like, but what does the Olympics do to scratch the itch that the All-Star game was trying to do with this player draft and all that?
Best on best.
Not just best on best, combinations that you don't typically see. Nobody.
Sid's gonna be on Connor McDavid's wing in that Olympics. Like, come on.
I would even. Well, no, I would have.
Sid will be on Nate's wing, I'm sure.
Bingo, and that's the thing. It's the All-Star game in an East-West format where you give everybody a chance to play it like a legitimate game, like it used to be, is still not creating the.
I don't know, man. You had Sid, Nate, McCarr on the ice at the same time, and
no. I'm going back.
Had your combination.
No. I went back to the traditional East-West 320-minute periods thing. Yeah. No player draft. It's
World
not
versus North America is the superior
It's
format.
Not creating that unique aspect of, what if Sid got to play with Nate because they're from the same hometown? That doesn't exist like that right now. Like, in that sense, it would only exist in a player draft.
And that's why even back in the day, the World versus North America format was way better than East-West.
And even then, it's the All-Star game is too casual of a best on best.
I agree.
You've got to put something substantial around it. And a gold medal in the Olympics is going to do that.
I was going to say, the All-Star format is impossible. It's been tried before. Baseball tried it with home field in the World Series. Putting stakes on your All-Star game does not work.
The only downside to what's happening with the All-Star game is that when you consider what's happening to the draft, also, you're running out of kind of ways to incorporate growing the game fan-wise with a gathering point for things like we've talked about the conversation with the draft, how it's going to be in Vegas this year, and then after that it's probably going remote.
Right.
That's going to suck for the league.
Yeah.
Sorry. Whether your GMs and your team and all your teams are saying it's easier to do this from their headquarters, I'm sure it is. It takes away from an element where you get to bring hockey fans together to one location because everybody's there versus let's just do everything at home.
Well, there's ways to do it, right? Like, there's ways to generate interest, but like I said, we don't have time to break down the All-Star.
No. I'm not trying to break it down like that. I'm just saying there's so many things that are cringeworthy in it now that it's such a non-event for me. Like,
I get that, and like I said, I think that's the case with every sport. So it's not even necessarily the NHL in particular.
Like what, like genuinely speaking, and listen, maybe it was a little unique for us because of the amount of topics that we've had to discuss over the course of the month of January and even this week. But
sure,
at the end of the day, I didn't want to have anything to, I think the only thing I actually did around the All-Star game was I did write an article, as I tend to do every year, on whoever goes for the Flyers.
Sure.
So I wrote a Konechny-based article, and I used the break as, using the break as, here's a great time to evaluate.
Right.
That's great. But I didn't want to write anything this week. I wanted a break too.
No, because even the NBA, does anybody care about the NBA All-Star game? No. What is everyone talking about regarding the NBA All-Star game?
The dunk contest.
No, the shoot-off. Steph Curry and...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Ionescu.
Okay,
They're going to go head to head. That's going to be great.
I didn't mean this year specifically, but that gets more buzz than the game itself does.
Absolutely, always. But I just mean this year in particular. Like the buzz has nothing to do with the game.
No, and I think there was a little bit of that in the NHL too.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
You like specialize the skills competition to individuals. You just put a little bit more emphasis back on that, just like the NBA does.
And one of the reasons I think that the All-Star game loses a little luster is that the games don't count. And one of the things that we can talk about here is games that do count.
Oh, that's
all
right.
We got a couple games to get here too. The Flyers play in Florida at home versus Winnipeg, at home versus Seattle. Florida and Winnipeg are two of the better teams in the NHL. Seattle's currently kind of trying to hang on to a playoff spot in the West.
Mm-hmm. Not tough at all, right?
It's a tough little week here. Like Florida's going to come out swinging. Obviously, Winnipeg is a good team.
The one thing that's going to interest me about the Florida game, considering where they are, and they were a team that was getting hot at the break, is you take a week off and the legs are not quite as fast coming out of the gate.
Right.
That's going to apply to the Flyers too, for what it's worth. Now, interestingly enough, the Flyers, to my, based on the way everything is, to my knowledge, practice literally hours after we're recording this on Sunday, early afternoon. Their practice, I believe, is at 2:00 in the afternoon in Florida. And then they practice Monday as well. So they're getting a couple of practice days right away to kind of get back into this a little bit.
Legs back up. Yep.
But it's still, once you get into the game, good luck. In the very beginning. It can
especially against a team like Florida.
Well, let's not forget
when they do come out swinging.
Well, let's not forget the first break that they came back from when Christmas happened. They played Vancouver, who was right at the top of the standings, and I know I know where we're getting at. Like, you want to get immediately to the Flyers won that game. Yes, they did. Yes. I know. Took a little while for anybody to kind of get it figured out, though. Like, the first period was very conservative. Then most of the second period was a little bit too, and then a little bit more open, but a little bit conservative as well. And then the Flyers scored 3 goals in like 2 minutes, and then that was it.
That was it. Yep.
But I'm saying expect that first period to be like feeling out process, unless Florida just comes out looking as good as they did.
Yeah,
because then But I think that's the way it's gonna go. Winnipeg is going to be interesting. Obviously, the Flyers got the better of them the last time they met too. Yep. Much to our surprise a little bit, because that was a team that was rolling.
That was a tough game, 1-0 in Winnipeg.
I guess there's an element that makes that a little bit different this time. That Winnipeg was on such a hot streak before that now they could, they certainly can't be on as hot of a streak. In fact, they lost 3 straight going in.
They're still good though.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way: they lost the game to the Flyers that snapped, what was it, an 8-game winning streak and a 14-game point streak, and won the next 2 anyway to kind of keep that going a little. And then, by the way, they didn't lose to slouches of teams. They lost to Boston and Toronto twice.
Right.
Like,
all right.
It's tough. Seattle's the interesting one because, and that's kind of the thing. Like,
that's a game you should win if you're trying to stay involved.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not going to sit there and tell you I expect them to win, but because Seattle's on the outside looking in, you kind of got to figure that one out.
You need to get 2 points there.
Well, to be honest, I don't even, if I'm the Flyers, I don't want that thing to get anywhere close to 7 and then be like, well, Seattle would be 8 if you don't find a way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're already on 5. Like, if you don't win a game this week because Florida and Winnipeg are what they are, and then Seattle finds a way to get the better of you because of, let's just say, urgency.
Listen, I'll already tell you that if they lose the 3 games this week, next week's podcast is going to be called Pull the Plug.
That's not where I'm even going with it. I'm sitting here going, you get this thing to 8 and you're staring straight down the barrel of 10 again.
Yep. Well,
and let's not forget too, like, I'm not trying to look too far ahead beyond the 3 games that are listed, but we're finishing out this particular week, and next week is Stadium Series preview already.
Yep.
It's 5 games until that game.
Absolutely. So
you want to see them win something before then is the point. Like, please win. If you want to keep this thing as a playoff discussion, win a game, at least 1 game this week, maybe 2.
Hopefully they can win a game this week to make our next show a little bit less depressing. That'll do it for us this week. Like I said, as mentioned here, we will be back next week to talk about the Stadium Series preview, recap this week's games.
Yep.
Maybe touch on, whatever the London Police talk about tomorrow. All right. It's been a long week. There wasn't even any hockey games. Excited to get back to the hockey games. follow Kevin for all your coverage for all those games at Kevin_Darso.
Yeah, my week of no games is over. I'm gonna have to do a preview on Tuesday again.
And then you can also follow the show everywhere at YWT Podcast. Download it everywhere you find your shows, including sportstalkphilly.com. And then, I think that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week and 1 week closer to the trade deadline for better or for worse. So until then, we'll see you.